Good afternoon, everybody. This is episode number 41 of the Sports Consiglieres Podcast. Along with me is my co-host and consigliere, Jerry Cala. Jerry, how you doing today?
Hey Jimmy, how are you today, bud?
Good. Just switching gears. We're going to turn to soccer. The MLS has started their season this week. Uh, we invited a Michael Lewis on the show who covers the MLS. So, Michael, thank you for joining us on the Sports Consiglieres Podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
And Michael, again, like
Can you
Jimmy
just
said, we were shifting gears. I mean, we had a lot of New York Giants on. We've dabbled in college basketball. Had several authors on for basketball and football and MLB as well. So we wanted to get into soccer, try to expand our horizon. So you are our first soccer guest, and it is an honor. Like I mentioned to you when we were chatting before, I've been following your work for a long time. In addition to MLS, I mean, you cover pretty much local soccer in the New York, New Jersey area, all levels, collegiately, USL, MLS. You were big with the NASL. So again, welcome to the program. And right off the bat, you actually had to remind me. I should have known this as a Red Bulls fan. I will admit that on the air that I am a Red Bulls fan. But yes, MLS 30-year anniversary. You've been there from the beginning. So what are your, in a nutshell, and I think you alluded to earlier, I don't want to take away your thunder, but in 1996, when the league started, how many years did you think the league was going to go before it folded?
I thought it was going to go at least 5 or 6 years, at least. There were people who said that after 1 or 2 years, it was going to go out of business. They were looking for things maybe under the carpet, for bad things. It was a first 6 games. It was a very encouraging start attendance-wise, and things went downhill from there the first season. But I always say, give it time. I say this about coaches. I say this about expansion teams. Give it time. And, I slowly but surely, I saw it grow. It almost went out of business after the 2001 season. They lost 2 Florida franchises. That was a real downtime for the league. I thought that was going to be it. And they did an unusual thing. They had several owners owning several teams to save the league. Not the best way you want to have a league, but MLS survived. And here we are. I can't believe it, celebrating its 30th year. I covered the North American Soccer League. That lasted 14 years. And that was considered a big deal. And I think it was a big deal when MLS kicked off its 15th year. I haven't done the math, but it was obviously 15 years ago. And I think it's here to stay. It'll be interesting to see how it continues to grow. And there's so many different ways to define growth.
Now, you alluded to the original NASL. Those were the golden years. We had probably one of the most famous clubs of all time, the New York Cosmos. A plethora of talent. It started when they brought in Pele, which was a great story. Again, I just saw who was it now? They just came out. I'm drawing a blank on the company. They just came out with a Cosmos retro line, jackets, jerseys, and Clive's, I believe it's his grandson, is actually one of the models. So I was actually checking that out. It was interesting, but I mean, he got pretty much Pele to come to the Cosmos, but I think, and I'll let you tell the story. Pele didn't start in Giant Stadium, and his first game, Pele wanted to return home to Brazil. So I'm sure you can fill in those details of him in Randall's Island on what he thought was happening to his feet.
Yeah, well, Clive Toy did first of all, a fabulous job of finding a way to get Pele here. It didn't happen overnight. It happened over a period of years. And I don't know if I would have the persistence to do anything that Clive Toy did. Fantastic. Signed for, if my memory is correct, for $3 million. I could be wrong on that. Today, $3 million is nothing to sign for. You know, Downing Stadium on Randall's Island is not what you consider a world-class facility, at least at that time in 1975. You know, a lot of it was dirt, and before the first game, they were painting the field green because there was not enough grass on it. And I don't care if you're a world-class player or a first-time player playing in professional sports, you do not play on um, a dusty field without grass. And that was something that Pelé or any other player did not deserve. The first game was an exhibition game between the Cosmos and the Dallas Tornado. Pelé scored for the Cosmos. I remember watching it on TV. I was working in Rochester, New York at the time, but I was in the office watching it that day. And it kicked off, I think, what I called it a big boom in soccer in this country. And not necessarily just in the North American Soccer League, but also at the youth level, because that's where we're going to get our future players from, even though it didn't obviously happen overnight. But we are still enjoying that boom from 1975. Here we are, what is it, 50, my Lord, 50 years ago, huh? Whew.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you know, like you said, that was, I remember reading when Clive started, you're talking about a gentleman that built something from scratch. I think his first big player that he brought in was Randy. I'm drawing a blank on the last name, from the Bahamas.
Randy Horton from Bermuda.
Bermuda, close. There we go.
It's funny. I've done a few stories about Randy. I always called him he looked like a real hard-nosed dude. He had he was tall, like 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", had an afro, beard and mustache, and he looked really, really mean. Happens to be one of the nicest people I've ever met in sports. But man, there's something to be said about at least looking intimidating. He was a good player. He was Rookie of the Year, led the league in scoring, helped the team win a championship, its first championship in 1972. Maybe it wasn't the Pelé years, but you know, you need those type of players to keep a franchise going. But as it turned out, Randy Horton wound up being the Speaker of the House in Bermuda.
Right.
So he was more than just a soccer player.
Right.
And he told me some tales about on and off the record on what transpired there, on some blowhards who might be talking in their House of Representatives, and some people who made a lot of sense as well too. But that's a podcast for another time.
Right. And I remember, like, you know, you're talking about Clive starts, he brings it, you know, Randy's from Bermuda, and then they start out. And I think this is important to get to where soccer has come. So we'll swing into the MLS shortly. But Clive starts out. Here's a gentleman that brought in Pele, right? And he starts out, his best player is Randy Horton, and he's giving out tickets in a Burger King in Long Island. So I think that's, you know, and that's the greatest part of the story, is that he went from A to Z, you know, with the Cosmos.
You know, it's funny. Today's generation might not necessarily appreciate what the pioneers of the modern game, and I call anyone who's played professional soccer in this country since 1967 part of the modern game, what they had to do to sell the sport. It wasn't easy at all. And yeah, giving out tickets at a Burger King, and I think I've been to that one in Hempstead, if I'm not mistaken, when I was going to college way back then on Long Island. But it wasn't just Clive, but it was just every team. You had to go to the grassroots and do unusual things. That's the way you had to sell the team on a game-to-game basis. And, you know, the early days of the Cosmos before Pelé came, that had to be a pretty scary time too, because it wasn't like they were playing in a big-time stadium. After, you know, they had played in Downing Stadium, Hofstra Stadium as well too. Not necessarily big time stadiums like Giant Stadium, where they made their mark.
Now, would you say? So let's fast forward a little bit. the Cosmos have the glory years, international star after international star, Kinalia, Beckenbauer, and then, which was Stevie Hunt. But then one player, and we talked about this earlier off camera, you talking about, American players, during that time. One player who would have probably benefited, I think, if he played today, because the U.S. national team, was it really, really non-existent, so to speak, back then, is Ricky Davis. I mean, everybody that played with Ricky Davis, I mean, they were, very, very, very complimentary of his skills. What did you think of Ricky Davis?
Davis on the U.S. national team. Unfortunately, he never got an opportunity to play in the World Cup. He came close as a member of the team that tried to qualify at the 1986 World Cup, but it fell short. But always a solid player with the team. Maybe not in the same orbit as Canalia, Carlos Alberto, Franz Beckenbauer, or Pelé, but a very, very good American player of his time. I wish he would have got that opportunity to be on the 1990 team that did qualify for Italy, but it wasn't in the cards.
Absolutely. And I think, again, to really signify back then, is everybody that was a Sports Illustrated reader remembers the biggest thing that Sports Illustrated offered was the posters. Because, back then, that's what you did as a kid. You put posters on your room. They had Canalia, they had Beckenbauer, of course, they had Pele, and they actually had Ricky Davis. So that was, I guess, a big moment, to have an American during that time, in Sports Illustrated, where you could buy his poster, which you see on eBay from time to time now.
It's, little things like that go a long way, especially back then. I spoiled by the internet because it's social media. We see players all the time out there. Way back in the day, 40, 50 years ago, you had to do things like that, selling posters, getting a big interview in a newspaper, getting interviewed on a local television station. Might not be a bigger deal today as it is back then, but that was a big deal. I remember way back in the day when I was covering the Rochester Lancers, they got on local TV. The team wanted to let everyone know about it. When someone got someone was interviewed, or they did a special 30-minute show about soccer in general. And Ricky Davis, unfortunately had to turn to indoor soccer after the North American Soccer League went out of business, but made a career of it. And I give a lot of credit to Ricky and his colleagues being pioneers, that they stayed in soccer for many, many years, making a career, whether it's a coach, general manager, or doing something in the game as well, too. They found ways of expanding themselves.
Right, and you could add like Werner Roth to that list, and he parlayed that into a nice cameo on the German national team in the movie Victory. So, that was, and again, you really think about it, that that was a big deal. Victory came out, I believe, in '81, and the Cosmos were still very, 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 very relevant, during that time. And that, you had Pele, you had Werner Roth. I mean, that was a movie for the times as well. But shifting to the finality, I guess, if you will, I was younger, much younger when that came to an end. What really brought down the original NASL?
Well, there were a few things. I think it expanded too quickly. They went all the way up to from 18 to 24 teams in one season. That's way, way too fast. I give a lot of credit to MLS, even though sometimes I think they were expanding too quickly, but they were going usually one team per season, which is a modest way of doing it, and I think a better way. But when you go from 18 to 24 teams, and some of those teams were not stable after 2 or 3 years. We're talking 1978. By 1980, the league started losing teams. They lost 3 teams after the 1980 season, another 4 teams for the 2 season, and it just kept on going down after that, and until if I'm not mistaken, they had 10 or 12 teams left, and you could call yourself a national league, but you can't survive on just 12 teams. That's maybe the beginning of a league. There were other factors as well too. The Cosmos, for example, they were the media darlings of the league. After Pelé left, Beckenbauer retired, Carlos Alberto retired. They had some very, very good players, but no one in the orbit of them. By the way, I'll be haunted by Giorgio Canaglia's ghost. Canaglia was definitely a quality player, no doubt about it. But you need more than one quality player to be a force. And there were other factors in the league too. Teams were losing money left and right, and at that time, owners were not necessarily millionaires. Some of them were they just loved the sport, and the league grew around them, and they didn't have enough money to keep up with the rest of the teams. And there were other owners who were millionaires, but they were not billionaires. So they were not in a capacity to lose large sums of money as perhaps owners today would.
Right.
So not that it's fun to lose money, but you better have a parachute or else.
Right. So if I'm not mistaken, right, the league folds in 84, 85?
It folds after the 1984 season.
84 season, right. And then they had like the Cosmos, for example, had a brief run indoor.
Correct. And it was, very, very brief.
Very brief, right.
They in the major indoor soccer league, they folded in the middle of the season, and that did not bode well for them or the league. No league wants to see a team fold, first of all, but in the middle of the season, that's like double damage for obvious reasons.
So now we go from after the 84 season, the NASL folds. Fast forward now, we get the World Cup, and part of the deal, right, the 94 World Cup. Some of the games were at the time Giant Stadium, which is now MetLife Stadium now occupies that space. But so now 94 the World Cup comes, and the deal is that the United States has to create a professional soccer league, which comes with a lot of skepticism based on the product, if you will, quote unquote, failing before or flaming out before. So now the league starts. And just give us some insight into those early days, because those early days are far from, Inter Miami, the Red Bulls, New York City FC, Red Bull Arena, which is now Sports Illustrated Stadium. All these new stadiums being built. We are way, 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 like you said, they've come a long way in 30 years. So let's just, if you discuss year one, if you will. Yeah.
Well, first of all, by the way, I still have trouble calling Sports Illustrated Stadium because to me it's Red Bull Arena.
Red Bull Arena,
RBA. But back then teams played in either football stadiums or baseball stadiums. Yes, we all know there is one team today, NYCFC, that plays in a baseball stadium, although they were supposed to have a soccer-specific stadium in Queens, New York, ready by 2027. But different, it was almost like obviously a different time. I think people were just happy to have professional soccer around. That was a very, very big deal. They originally wanted to start the league in 1995, but they decided to hold it off for a year. Needless to say, I was disappointed because I wanted to start covering professional soccer again tomorrow. But I think the powers that be did a smart move. In the beginning, all the players, virtually the entire U.S. national team that played in Italia 90 performed in MLS. And that was a big deal. Eric Winalda, John Harkes, Tab Ramos, Tony Miola. The last two gentlemen I mentioned played for the New York, New Jersey Metro Stars. A very long free kick from Kearney, New Jersey, where they grew up and played. But it was a big deal having U.S. national team players performing in the league. Very few players were were able to play overseas in Europe at a consistent level at that time. And the U.S. Players, they were helped by a bunch of, let's say, well-known European and South American players, such as Roberto Donadoni from Italy, Carlos Valderrama from Colombia. And these players had just played in the World Cup. People knew who they were. I think the first year, was an exciting time, but without a team owning its own stadium, that was a big deal, because you were at the mercy of the football team or the baseball team for dates. So I think a big turning point in the league was 1999, when the Columbus Crew built the first Soccer Pacific Stadium. It was called the Erector Set because that's what it looked like. It was very basic, but it was a start. And then slowly but surely, things began to change. More and more teams added Soccer Pacific stadiums. And that's when you could have your unique environment. You're not playing in a gigantic NFL stadium that holds 60,000 and you only have a crowd of 15. Now you're playing in your own stadium where a crowd of 15 to 20,000 is very, very good. These days, teams don't sell out their stadiums. It is considered a disappointment. But I think the big turning point was when teams were able to own their own stadiums, so they could set their dates, playing dates, instead of being at the mercy of other organizations.
Now, let's fast forward now. So the league comes in, and like I said, it's remarkable. I mean, you talk about from the uniforms, the whole thing, getting out of as many football-specific stadiums as you can. Now we come to a point where I think people were shocked when Don Garber, the commissioner of MLS, came out with the Apple package. I think people were very suspect of that. It's MLS. Are people going to pay for the product like that? And that's something that pretty much, including the playoffs, on a personal level, I like it. I think it gives good bios, so to speak, on each team. There's you go on the Red Bulls, you go back, there's history, you profile current players, ex-players. I mean, I think it's really a good way, for the fan to connect. I'm not a big streaming guy, but I think, would you say it's safe to say overall, the Apple TV deal has been a success?
That's a good question. I'd like to see the numbers. They're getting $2.5 billion over 10 years, and that's a difficult thing to turn down. Definitely, I think if someone wanted to pay me that for 10 years, I definitely would go for it. But Apple has not released the viewership numbers, and I think I'm not the only one asking this. Sure, other media people and fans are as well too. And the big thing is, beyond straight numbers, is it growing? Has it grown from year one to year three? We're still pretty much in the early stages of the contract, but are there more people watching it? I'm not I've learned to be more of a streaming person because there's so many more events on that. I kind of miss watching things on a bigger screen on a TV, and maybe sitting on my couch with my laptop on my lap. But I don't know how successful it is. I wish I could tell you. The fact that it's still around, I guess it's good. But until Apple releases the numbers, and I know at MLS Cup last year, Commissioner Don Garber talked about that. Maybe he's making Apple being the villain. But I'd love to know the numbers, like I think you would too, and everyone else.
Sure, and I think too, like you say, soccer is a homegrown sport, so to speak. The thing that I miss the most, and I bring this up every game I watch on Apple TV, is I miss, for me, listening to Steve Cangelosi with Shep Messing. That's the thing. You get, a quote unquote a national team covering your team, and it changes from match to match. So I think that's, For me, if that's the biggest negative, I mean, obviously, who's going to turn that money down? MLS is looking to expand. They're looking to do a lot of things. Apple claims that the memberships, if you will, have grown overseas. I mean, a part of that, obviously, is the Messi effect. But I mean, I think, what I like about it in this aspect, and I'll probably get slammed for saying this, is that if you really look at it, right, you have a few games that are on Fox, right, and then the playoffs included. Everything is on Apple. So I guess you're not like the NFL, right, the Yankees. You bounce around from the different streaming services. Everything is almost, with the exception of the national game that you get weekly, right? Everything is under the Apple umbrella. So I guess that's a positive, that they're not making you, hey, go to this app, go to that app. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I grew up watching sports on TV, and I know things are changing, and right, I'm trying to stay with the curve as well too. And I think for a new generation of fans, that's not going to be a problem. Maybe for us, it will be a problem. I'd prefer to see it more on TV. I think I want to know, how do you sell something to a fan if they have to pay money to watch it? And maybe, listen, I'm not a mathematician, but maybe you put a few more games on television to get them to watch on Apple. And by the way, before I forget about Steve Cangelosi, when I'm watching the Red Bulls on streaming, and he's one of the announcers, it's great to listen to him. And he's not a homer by any means. He's a great announcer, but he brings something else to that broadcast. He knows that team, the organization, and you could tell the background that he gives. And that's not just him, but it's also the other announcers who have done, who have called, have their home teams out there as well too. Colorado Rapids, their announcers would do a better job doing their games, obviously. Not rooting for them, but again, understanding what the team is about and what some of the players are about. So I wish MLS would put more of those homegrown announcers on those teams. I miss it. You could really tell the difference between that. And there are some really good announcers on Apple in general, but there's something missing when they're bouncing around week to week from different team to team. Some are good at it and some aren't, but that's the way it is, unfortunately, right now.
No, and actually, I think most people that follow MLS, they definitely, connect Steve Cangelosi with the Red Bulls, just like Max Bristos, with LAFC.
Right.
But again, like you said, Steve's a true professional. He did I'm not a big hockey guy, and I'll even, back in the day before he gave that up, I would actually listen to him because, he's prepared. But, specifically to the Red Bulls, like you said, he's giving you not just calling the game, he's giving you the foundation of the game, why things are happening, why the Red Bulls are doing this, why their roster is constructed. He knows the coaching staff. It's just a totally different experience, from watching at home. So I definitely, agree with you, on that. It'll be interesting to see where the Apple, where it goes going forward. I think, and you might agree with this, I don't think we'll be seeing numbers for a while from Apple.
I hope you're wrong, but I fear you're right. So, and when you don't see numbers, you just wonder, what are they hiding? What don't they want us to see? And I hope it's sooner than later. And but I fear you're right. We're not going to see them sooner than later.
So now, just shifting gears a little bit. I'm a North Jersey guy. We talked about, the Cosmos, the Red Bulls, MLS in general. We talked about Eric Stover. So now I want to just, draw our viewers' attention to one of your newer articles, if you will. And I'll just leave it to you to start from scratch. So Eric Stover, like Michael and I discussed, he was the CEO of the Red Bulls. Cosmos, really, really did a lot for both organizations. And now he's involved in a new project, which involves historic Hinchcliffe Stadium in Paterson, New Jersey, which is looks fantastic. Giants did some things there with some local football teams. I know high school soccer has played a few games there as well. So now, can you just tell us about Eric's new venture, if you will, in bringing professional soccer to Hinchcliffe?
Yes, a historic stadium, no doubt about it. First of all, I covered soccer games in the American Professional Soccer League during the dark ages of soccer in this country, between the NASL and MLS. Covered games there back in 1988 and 89, before it got obviously renovated. But beautiful stadium, seen pictures of it, and of course stories about it on local television. Eric is leading the way to bring a USL First Division, League One team there in a few years. North Jersey is, I don't have to remind you that it's a big soccer hotbed for obvious reasons. And with professional soccer growing, you don't necessarily need to have an MLS team, especially in this day and age when you might not necessarily have a billionaire owner. So hopefully in a year or two, we're going to see a new team in Paterson, New Jersey. Obviously, things have to fall together, but you're talking about a stadium that doesn't have a lot of tenants, so they'll be able to pull off, I think, a pretty decent schedule. And it's been years since North Jersey has had a professional team. Way back when, we're talking a couple decades ago, there was a team called the North Jersey Imperials that played in the U.S. Interregional Soccer League, which was part of the USL, but they did not last very long. I have no doubt that Eric and the rest of the owners and team management will put together a successful franchise there.
And what do you think? I mean, obviously, like we talked about, very difficult, probably even more difficult now. They're starting from scratch. They have the stadium, which has history to the area. It means a lot to the community. The mayor of Paterson, and Eric, they've been kind of lockstep with this project, from the get-go. What do you think will be their biggest hurdle to overcome with just putting fans to come to a game? Because now it's Saturday, they're playing a game at Hinchcliffe at 7:30. The Red Bulls are playing at Sports Illustrated Stadium. New York City's playing in Yankee Stadium. All three teams are playing at the same time. How are they going to survive, do you think, in a situation like that?
Maybe they don't schedule their games or all their home games on Saturday night at that time. Maybe you do a couple of afternoon games, especially when it's early in the season, when it's warmer out during the day, or you play on Sundays. You stay out of the way. It's almost like you've got in this country going to another type of football: high school football on Friday, college football on Saturday, pro football on Sunday. So, you're
three different markets not affecting each other for the most part. Right.
So, and listen, I'm not telling them how to do it. They'll probably figure it out on their own. But you don't want to have too many games going up against those two teams. Once in a while, the Red Bulls and NYCFC play at the same time at home on Saturday nights, which is, I think, crazy. I'd like to see them get away from that, but that's the way the schedule works out, because NYCFC's got to play at a baseball stadium, and we all know who takes precedence there, the Yankees and the Mets. But it's, I think the best way is to stay out of the way as much as possible, and develop their own brand. Worry about what they have, and who knows, they could come up with a young emerging star. And the thing is, this is USL League One. It's a minor league, and we all know in minor leagues, if you're a good player, you're not going to last that long with that team. You're going to move up to another USL team, maybe a championship team, USL championship team, which is their top league at the moment. Or if you're really, really good, maybe you do an MLS team. And if you're exceptional, and there are players who have moved from the USL to Europe. So maybe your young up and coming players won't last too long, but that's what a USL League One team has to do.
Now, lastly, you talked about the structure of the USL. Is the USL, because the USL is looking to have 3 divisions, right? I'm correct in that. And are they looking? The term promotion relegation gets thrown around so much in soccer, obviously, and we're looked at, if you will, by other parts of the world like, they don't have promotion relegation. Do you think there's ever a scenario where the USL, and I know there's plenty of MLS 2 sides or teams associated with an MLS side that's in USL, do you ever envision a scenario where USL says, you know what, we have pro-rel, we're going to try to take on and attack the pyramid of American soccer?
I think eventually, I would not be surprised if they do try that. The problem is, of course, you've got owners that invest so much money that, do you want to be in a situation where you put in millions and millions of dollars, and all of a sudden your team doesn't do well this one year, and you get relegated to that lower league, and that lower league isn't as, let's say, sexy as that first league? Mm-hmm. Then you start getting lower attendances, less income, that sort of thing. Saying that, though, if both leagues do have owners who are willing to lose money, it keeps coming down to this: whether or not how much money you have and how much money you're willing to lose, and maybe sit on their ego a bit too. I could see it happening perhaps someday. Perhaps maybe not now, because I think, especially with the USL wanting to add a first division league, where they're going to need millions, if not, not even millionaires. They're probably going to need billionaires to really make it work if they really want to go head to head against MLS. But perhaps someday I could see it happening, because that is one league, if you know what I mean, one organization.
Right.
It's gonna take some brave owners to say yes to it, I think.
Right. And I just don't see, like you talk about, a few owners will throw out an MLS. Like, is the Kraft family willing to lose money? I doubt it. Arthur Blank, I doubt it. The NFL owners that are in MLS, and there's more and more of them, I just don't see them, saying, oh, this is great. We'll get relegated. No problem. I just don't see it happening. I don't. And again, listen, as we talk about, I think too, I know, like, in the playoffs last year, Jordi Alba had an issue. Oh, why are there playoffs in the MLS? I mean, ultimately, right, we have to, I think, recognize as soccer fans that, yes, soccer is an international sport, but in America, for a lot of reasons, right, you have to do what's best for your quote-unquote, potential customers. And I don't think that's why, one, we'll ever get pro-rel, and number two, that's why, I mean, like, the playoff, MLS playoff system has expanded, right? That's the American way. Hockey, eight teams make it in hockey. 16 teams, 8 in each conference. So, again, very interesting times. Again, I just want to say, thanks for joining us This has been, a great episode for me, finally talking to about soccer with somebody. What we'd like to do, and if it's okay with you, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot, is if we could kind of get you to commit to coming back. And I think we really need to do a full show and really chip away, at the MLS being its 30-year anniversary this year.
I'd be more than happy to. Thank you. I thought when you said put me on the spot, there's going to be a lightning round and you're going to throw out a word and I'd have to give you my first thought off the top of my head. But no.
Oh, we can. Well, listen. You know what? I'm going to save that for the next episode.
Okay, sure.
All right, have it real quick. What's the first word that comes to your mind? Giorgio Canaglia.
2 words. Super striker.
Beckenbauer.
Class.
Shep Messing.
3 words. Wild and crazy. From back in the day. Back in the day.
Oh yeah, it's legendary. It's legendary.
Superb goalkeeper though, indoor and outdoor.
I'll turn it over to Jimmy right now. Jimmy will close out the show again. Michael, we look to talk to you in the future, and thanks a million for coming on. It's been a great episode, really.
Well, listen, Michael. I apologize. It looks like Jerry. Once he started talking about Burger King, I knew I was out of my league. But I really appreciate the time. For the casual fan, you really sucked us in for the episode, and thanks for being patient with us as far as setting this interview up. But we look forward to the season. We look forward to soccer, especially in the States, and it's just keeps on growing. It might not be growing as much as some people like, but it's still trending in the right direction. But I appreciate your time and appreciate the work you do, Michael.
Thank you very much. Like I said, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And whenever you need me down the line, let me know.
We will definitely take you up on that offer, Michael. Thanks again. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, Michael.